So, did she try to fuck you?
No.
No, me neither. I mean, I wouldn't feel that bad about it, but she tried it with the fish people.
Podcasts. A Frontier. These are the voyages of the podcast Captain Slug. Its ongoing mission to explore strange new episodes, to seek out new jokes and new references, to split infinitives that no one has split before. Captain Slog, Stardate 44. These are the continued adventures of me, Eddie Edwards, and my good friend and colleague, Mr. Mark Bench, as we trek our way through all of Star Trek. Anyway, Mark, how you been in this horrifying period of enforced mourning?
I've been mourning my own diet, largely, because I finally decided, after, as what should be, I mean, last week you met my wonderful... fantastic, wise fiance, and in what I think has already been brought up several times in this podcast before, for months, she's been saying, you have a gluten intolerance, like, because you're not fat, you're just bloated, and you poop all the time, and it's horrible, and you're all this, right? And I'm like, yeah. And then my friend came round a couple of weeks ago and went, I think I have a gluten intolerance, and he told me about it, and I went, I've got that. So I got that second opinion, so I for the last few weeks, for the last few days, I've been going non-gluten, and motherfucker, it's hard. And I don't mean hard like psychologically, like I actually feel fine. I actually feel really good even after just a couple of days. Like physically, my body is like, oh my god, finally he's been listening to the only person he listens to less than his own fiancée, which is his own body. And a bit like we went to see Girl from the North Country. I watched the first 15 minutes, went out to the lobby to go on my phone for 20 minutes, and then just came back in and went, I can't watch the rest of this. This is I get why people might like this, but this is like if The Colour Brown was a musical. Every choice they made seems to be the least interesting one. So luckily my brother was there, and I literally just went to the pub and read The Hobbit. So anyway, but before that, we were like, let's go and get dinner. We were going to go to this Korean place. We went in and we were like, what do you have that's gluten-free? And the manager just like kind of gritted her teeth and went, yeah, nah. Like, not this cuisine, mate. You're gonna have to cut this out. This is ridiculous.
It's a key part of what is most cultures consider a staple food.
Yeah,
has gluten in, so it's very difficult to avoid. But yeah, it's always good though when you find out that like little thing, like something that's like Emma had it for years. She's had like a bunch of health problems, and then she went to see a chiropractor about some issues with her back, and it was like just immediately she was like, oh, I'm not in pain anymore. And now because I'm not in pain, my body's not constantly trying to combat the pain, so the knock-on effects are just sorting every little thing out.
Yeah,
it's always good when you can do that. When you work out, because I love when you see like a post of somebody on like fucking line where they're like, "Oh, I hate oranges. They always taste like burning," and then it's followed up by another like tweet where it's like, "So I found out I'm allergic to oranges."
It truly has. I mean, obviously this podcast gets woker by the second, but it truly has given me quite a lot of empathy for, because Laura's Laura's family tree is quite complicated. Laura's cousin is like proper celiac, like. Oh yeah. We were on holiday and she ordered a sundae and they brought the sundae out and it had a cookie on it and she went, I can't have that. And he went, we'll take the cookie off, and she said, no, you need to make it again. Like you can't you don't just take it in and take the cookie off. Like I will get seriously ill. You can't. I need a fresh one. And obviously, as a human being, I was like, oh, that's pretty sad. But now, now that it's happened to me, I really give a shit.
That's the thing with celiacs. I always feel bad for them because so gluten intolerance is a thing that does exist, but it's not as a lot of people. There are a lot of people out there who say they've got it because it's kind of become a weird trendy thing. But what happened was people who have celiac disease have to have special food made. So the food was made and it turned up in shops that said gluten-free, and people assumed that was like a health thing. So they jumped on the fad. And that means that prices of gluten-free foods kind of went down for like celiac people, which is a real benefit. But the downside is that when celiac people are in a restaurant and say, I can't have gluten, all that the wait staff and everybody in the kitchen do is roll their eyes. And it's like, no, I get that, but I get that. I know what you're thinking, but I will die.
Yeah, totally. Because it's kind of a thing. Like it doesn't. Like obviously, I'm not that bad. Like it hasn't killed me thus far. It just makes me really sad and angry and fat. And burgers, like I think the burger is the single greatest contribution mankind has made to the universal collective unconscious.
Invented by Kim Jong-il.
All right.
You believe North Korean propaganda.
So I'm gonna,
which I exclusively do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this podcast pro North Korea. So I'm not going crazy. I'm not going to be like I'll never have gluten again. Like no, I'll save myself up for a nice burger, or if I'm having a day where I'm really sad and don't have anything to do later, I will order a Burger King. It's fine. Yeah. Like it just makes me, it makes my belly sad. But I ignore that bastard all the time. So, but yeah, it's whatever. It is what it is.
I'm super lucky in that I have a very not particularly rare, but it's a thing which is I get transferred pain from indigestion, which means if I eat something that's really spicy, my stomach's fine, but my shoulder really hurts. And what I've realised is I don't care enough about my shoulder hurting to stop me eating Nando's.
I'm kind of like my relationship with. I mean, I probably shouldn't admit it here because whoever the current Home Secretary is might confiscate my passport. But my relationship with something that I smoke. I'm not going to say what it is. The Hobbits enjoyed it in Lord of the Rings. My relationship with that is questionable. Like I really need to stop and take a look at myself and how I work with it, etc. Right, but the main problem is that I get serious like Scooby-Doo level munchies. I get stoned the way that people who have never been stoned write stoned characters in films.
Yeah,
I'm just like, what do we have in this kitchen? It's simply not enough. But because now I'm like, well, I don't want to do that because I know what I'll immediately do is order a McDonald's. I'm like, well, guess weed's out. Oh. And by weed, of course, Pretty Patel, I mean the things that grow in my garden.
It's not Pretty Patel
nightmare
anymore.
They are.
It weirdly got worse. Have you? Oh, by the way, just to say, I know neither of us watched it, but have you seen the clip of Australia News' coverage of the funeral, where somebody gets out of a car, walks in, and they're like, I don't know who this is. It's probably some minor royal. Really, at the tail end now of the dignitaries coming in, and it's Liz Truss.
That's. I think I don't know if we said this last week, but it's going to be a really interesting pub quiz question in about 10 years. Who was the Prime Minister when the Queen died? And no one will know.
Yeah,
I might ask that this week. See if anyone knows.
Who is Prime Minister now would probably not get you 100% response rate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of gluten free though, fish people.
Yeah. I think I can sum up my feelings on this episode, Mark, by telling you what 2 tabs I currently have open on Chrome. I have a tab open asking where I typed into Google what the air date of this episode is, and it was June 1989. and I also have another tab opened to the Wikipedia page for Gene Roddenberry, where I've scrolled down to the section called Health and Decline. Where I can thankfully confirm that in September of this year, 1989, Gene Roddenberry will have his first stroke. And
I don't think we agree on this, man. I actually quite liked this episode. I thought it was a nice little episode. It had some really fun little Riker moments. We got some really nice little Riker reactions. I actually think Lwaxana Troi is quite a lot of fun.
I don't. And I think that, getting me wrong, I think that a lot of people working on this episode put in a lot of effort to make this the most palatable version of Gene Roddenberry's terrible idea for an episode.
Well, what I looked into is that originally this episode was supposed to be a Dixon Hill episode. Okay. And someone turned right because Tracy Tormé, I think it is. I've only ever seen their name written down, but Tracy Tormé. This is the last episode that they wrote for Star Trek, even though they wrote some of the better episodes earlier in this couple of seasons. Because they wrote this brilliant episode about Dixon Hill, and then the boss man came in. Not the boss man, not Gene, but I don't know if it was Rick Berman said, "Look, it's the boss's wife. She does it once a year. It's got to be this one. You've got to.
We've got to episode 19. We haven't put her in yet.
You've got it. We're not teaming her up with the Borg. You've got to slot her in somewhere because we can't put her with Q. Can't have her overshadowed. So, yeah. So apparently the Dixon Hill aspects of this episode, I'll just because it. We'll get into the plot of the episode in a bit, but part of the plot of this episode is that Picard is trying to play a Dixon Hill adventure and just can't seem to make it work. Which I think is a bit meta.
He keeps pausing the game because dangerous things happen in his film noir adventure. I'm just going to say this. Picard is what I believe the term is a save scummer. Somebody who would Picard couldn't play Dark Souls.
No.
Now I've not attempted to play Dark Souls, but I have played Bloodborne for like 20 minutes, and I didn't actually find it particularly challenging. But it was around the mates, and it was the first bit, so maybe I'm completely wrong about Soulsborne's.
So obviously a guy walks in, he whips out a gun on Picard. Picard says no, too violent. Next guy comes in, tries to strangle him, whips it, that's too violent. Next guy comes in, machine gun. I refuse to believe that whatever fictional noir writer wrote the Dixon Hill stories didn't have a single story that started with a sexy 1930s broad walking in and saying that she needs to find her lost husband.
Red-headed femme fatale walks into the room. She looked like trouble. Like something like that, it's fairly standard.
Of all the private eyes and all the city, she had to walk into mine, etc.
Yeah. Of that guy who does walk in with the gun, not with the knife, but with the gun and with the machine gun. That character's name is Slade Bender, which I did make a note of because it's brilliant.
Yeah.
But I think we should also point out it is the somewhat legendary character actor Robert Costanzo, who, if you don't know him, you're probably if you're young, he's Joey's dad in Friends, and if you're slightly older, he's in Total Recall and Die Hard 2.
Yes, he's the cop's brother. The other cop, that she's a traffic cop.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, and he's also the in Total Recall, he's the guy who's like Arnie's work colleague, who's like, oh, you don't want to go to Recall. Which is, depending on your read of Total Recall, either makes him a true friend who had the right idea or a shadowy government agent.
Yeah, exactly. There's a really good YouTuber called Rowan J. Coleman. And if you're a Trek fan and you're listening to this, you've probably found him already, because he does really in-depth retrospectives of, like, feature-length retrospectives of the various Trek series. But he's kind of finished now because he obviously done from Trek up to Enterprise and then up to Star Trek Beyond, and then he said, I'm going to stop here because I can't really retrospect something that isn't done and the culture hasn't decided really what it is. So he's moved on to doing other things, and he does a really good retrospective series about the Verhoven trilogy, RoboCop, Total Recall, and the Starship Troopers one came out the other night, and it's 25 minutes long, and I'm so excited. This is my life in my 30s. I'm really excited to hear a Scottish guy who just shares my own opinions talk about how I feel about Starship Troopers.
I will bring up what I have to bring up every time that Starship Troopers is brought up, which is Brows Held High have a fucking series of reviews going into the in-depths of Starship Troopers, which is clocks in at around 4 hours, and it's the first video is an hour of just a retrospective on Verhoven, and then of Heinlein, the guy whose book it is. The second one is just now, and it's a retrospective on Verhoven, and then in the third video he starts to review Starship Troopers, which is I introduced Starship Troopers to Emma, and I was like saying it's a miracle this movie got made. He only really got away with it because the studio management changed 5 times and nobody knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And I was watching it. There's a certain point in this movie where the producers were watching the first cut and they got furious and nearly like pulled it from the cinema and like pulled it from being released. And I was like, wait and see if you can guess what moment it was. And the moment Neil Patrick Harris walks in dressed essentially as an SS officer, she was like, "What was it then?" I was like, "Yeah."
It's I mean, like Paul Verhoeven is a genius. But he must obviously be a genius at pitching, because there's no way you could walk into any office in Hollywood, especially in the mid-90s, and say, I want to make a movie that's basically a 90s action movie if it had come out in a universe where the Nazis won.
Yeah, I want to make fun of the inherent right-wing fascist propaganda that is American action movies by saying the quiet bit out loud.
Brilliant.
Can I do that? And they're like, well, you made RoboCop.
yeah, exactly. And that was a fun movie about a robot cop or something. I don't really know. Right?
Yeah, there's no politics there.
Yeah, I don't understand why that board member was the bad guy. Surely it was all them criminals that they kept throwing through the police station.
Oh man, RoboCop's such a great film.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we got off topic there. Robert
okay.
Costanzo's in this episode. I think we need to address, before we move on, because if anybody's watched this is one of the bits of Star Trek trivia that I think everyone knows. One of the fish guys in this is Mick Fleetwood. which is George Clooney doing the voice of Sparky the gay dog in South Park levels of, like, I want to be in your show. Can I be in your show? Yes. Do you want to wear a fish costume and be a weird alien? And Mick Fleetwood would presumably that's all I ever wanted.
Well, I was looking into this. I have a quote from Fleetwood here. Quote: I always loved Star Trek. I played an Antidean, half man, half fish. Not that it was a huge part, but I loved that I could be part of it in some shape or form. I shaved my beard to put all the prosthetics on. I said, I'll shave my beard off if you promise me that I get to beam down or beam up. At least one of those things, either up or down. You've got to promise me that it's in the script. And they do. They beam me down into the ship, so I shaved my beard off and I had a lot of fun. So, I don't know.
I completely get it, though. Because, like, if somebody from Star Trek came to me and were like, well, we know you somehow got famous. And they're like, oh, we know you're a fan. Do you want to be in an episode? And I was like, yeah, I'll do anything. He's like, right, we need somebody who's good. We need a gack salesman. Yeah. Like, can you slop some gack into a tin? 100% I would do that.
So there's a story about Samuel L. Jackson. I don't know if it's apocryphal because I've heard conflicting takes on how this happened, but this is the story I want to be true. So back in like 1997, for whatever he was promoting, he went on TGI Friday with Chris Evans, which was like a kind of like late night Friday night talk show here in the UK. With a radio presenter. It was actually really funny. I really liked it. But Chris Evans said, "What's your dream role?" And he said, "I want to be in Star Wars." He said, "I don't care if I'm underneath a stormtrooper helmet. I don't care if anyone knows that it's me. I have to be in these movies." Apparently, the next day, someone from Lucasfilm saw that and said, "Do you really want to be? You can be in fucking Star Wars if you want to be in Star Wars." And he was like, Oh no, that's what. So on the show, he said, Yeah, I'll be like the first Black Jedi. Like, and I think he said like, I think he even said I'll have a purple lightsaber. I'll have bad motherfucker on it. But I have to be in it. So Star Wars called him up, and he said, I don't care if I'm under a stormtrooper helmet. You got to put me in this. And they got him in and made him Mace Windu.
Yeah, I think the original quote is like, I would play a grain of sand to be in that movie, and then okay, and this is directly from the Red Letter Media reviews of the prequel trilogy, and it's not a right to put this in the parlance of movie executives. Urban audiences don't tend to go watch Star Wars movies, so George Lucas saw an opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I can get black people to give a fuck about a Star Wars movie. Samuel L. motherfucking Jackson.
Just before we came on air, I was telling you that Laura showed me Dirty Dancing for the first time, and I absolutely fell in love with it immediately. But I was looking up its kind of legacy and stuff, and so Dirty Dancing is often referred to in pop culture as Star Wars for girls, but in 2007, Sky Movies done a poll to find out what are like women's most watched movies. Number 1, Dirty Dancing. What do you think was number 2?
Was it Star Wars?
It was fucking Star Wars, yeah. Star Wars is for everyone. Star Wars is Star Wars for everybody.
There's a picture floating around of somebody like cosplaying, like somebody in costume for Halloween as it's a girl and she's dressed as a X-wing pilot, and somebody just put in the thing is like, this was pre. Like it's like an image perfect, and it's like she had to go to the cinema with a notebook and a torch so she could take notes of and like knowing that this only appears on screen for like fucking 10 minutes total in the film.
Yep.
So and it's people like nerds are of all stripes. They could be somebody like Mick Fleetwood could be a fucking fish man. Kelsey Grammer shows up in like TNG later on because he was a huge fucking fan as well. Like, I love that about Star Trek, that even with TNG, like, it's still you can still kind of call it early Star Trek because it's really only the second Star Trek series. But already by that point, Star Trek was important enough that there's enough people out there that you get these weird cameos where people just like Stephen Hawking's in an episode. Yeah, it's like, of course he fucking is.
Talking about the last that done that. So I've just pretty much finished. I'm about 90% there. I've basically just finished my proton pack build.
Oh.
And I'll show you later. So all of the parts of the proton pack have names, and all of those names just came up by the fans in the 80s and 90s who watched the movie, tried to recreate it, and then, well, we have to communicate to each other what these bits are called. So they just came up with like how it works and what all the bits are called. Apparently Dan Aykroyd isn't super on board with it, because in Afterlife they refer to some of the parts like the cyclotron, and Dan Aykroyd like wasn't huge on board because Dan Aykroyd knows exactly how a proton pack would work. Like there's a bit in the special features where he walks in and he sees a redone Ecto 1 and he's like, oh my god, this is gorgeous. And instead of looking at the body or the paint job or the spectacular restoration job that they've done, he immediately looks at the roof and goes, oh, there's the spectronomizer and there's the this and there's the that.
Yeah, there's a special feature on the game, the Ghostbusters game, where he's looking at like the roof and he literally points to a part and goes, that's the such and such device. Which is actually super easy to invent. The real trouble was getting minimised to the point where it could be on a car, which took Spengler and he's like, Dr. Spengler took about 2 years to work that out. And he's just like, yeah, it's like Dan Aykroyd exactly has worked out the science of how to capture ghosts, which I cannot emphasise enough, aren't real.
Yeah, he's gone on record several times. Whenever people ask him about the technology of Ghostbusters, he's like, yeah, that would work.
Yeah.
Would it?
If assuming it's based on a hell of an assumption, and that assumption is it would work if ghosts work the way I think they do.
Yeah, it's a bit like, but at the same time, he's a bit like, when I say on the spectrum, I don't mean that. He's on the same spectrum as Harrison Ford, where it's like, look, Harrison Ford was Rick Deckard, Han Solo, and Indiana Jones. If that guy comes on your talk show and just wants to talk about carpentry joints, do it, right? Yeah. Dan Aykroyd, if ever he came in and he went, do you want me to speak at great length about how a proton pack actually works? I'd be like, please, just can I record this so I can listen to it every night before I sleep?
Like, right, okay. I mean, like, yeah, you could of course start doing that, but please understand that there will be a point during your talk where I will come.
So the first thing that happens in this episode is that the Mick Fleetwood and Stevie Nicks beam up from a planet, and
they don't have any lines of dialogue. They beam up. They're in like a catatonic state because that's how they do space travel. So they don't even just dress as a fish. You wouldn't. You don't even actually need to have a dude in that suit.
No. So Pulaski's there, and they have to. Captain Picard says, "Oh, can you sort out a bit of the med bay to keep these guys alive and going?" And she's like, "Yeah, it'll take a few hours." To which I'm like, "You knew they were coming. They didn't ring the bell. Why are you not doing it?"
O'Brien watch.
He turns round to O'Brien and says, quote, you can store them for a few hours, right? And O'Brien says, "Sure, I'll keep them here out of the way." What, in a cupboard?
Out of the way is like the transporter room is very much the fucking front door of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
They're not out of the way. I wish there was a coat hook in there and he just puts them up onto the side.
There's a beautiful little moment that I wonder if anyone saw in its original airing, because obviously it was on standard definition. But Riker and Picard are in the transporter room in full Starfleet dress robes, and O'Brien is behind them, and he kind of looks at them both and then just smirks to himself because he thinks they look ridiculous.
What I love is they beam on board. Picard does like a full welcoming speech, and then they go, "Oh yeah," and then explains to somebody else that they're not going to answer because they travel in a catatonic space, and as if they're stupid. It's like, well, why did you bother doing your welcome to the Enterprise speech, Picard?
No, what they do, Eddie, is they travel in a catatonic status.
Oh yeah,
stasis. I wonder, because I'm coming around a bit on Pulaski in the last couple of episodes.
Oh, she was great in this episode. I have to give her props for that.
Did the writers or Diana Mulder put that in to be like, look, when she said data, she wasn't being disrespectful. She just doesn't know how to pronounce that type of A? Or alternatively, is there a new android who's been discovered called Stasis, and she's like, nah, I'm not having that.
My guess is, here's my guess. They actually had some lines for Mick Fleetwood, and he was really bad. So they the writers in the corridor outside going, no, fucking Jesus. Like scribbling that out, handing it over to her. That was her first run. She'd literally, somebody's holding that line up off camera.
Yeah.
And they're like, look, we just say this once Mick's left the room, and we can edit around it.
The best thing about this episode is how much Worf really likes those fish people.
Oh yeah, he describes them as a handsome race, which is nice. And later on, Wesley tells him that he's handsome for a Klingon.
Yeah,
which is I've got a little notebook that I make notes in as I'm watching this of stuff that I want to jump out, and that is I believe the 7th occasion in my notes for this episode where I've written down the letters H and R next to each other. This episode is a fucking HR nightmare.
Yeah.
So we haven't said what the actual plot of this episode is. Lwaxana Troi is having the Betazoid menopause, and they're going to a conference. They're taking the fish people, and she's now the ambassador from Betazoid, so she's coming along as well. But the main reason she's there is because when Betazoids go through the menopause, it quadruples their sex drive, and she wants to bang Picard.
Oh.
That's
quadruple.
The plot. That's
or more.
Or more. Yeah.
Or more. Yeah.
And when I say that's the plot, that's not the B plot. That's not a subplot. That is the only plot of this episode.
Yep.
Everything else that happens that could be considered a subplot happens as a result of this, because Picard tries to hide from her in the holodeck. That's where we get all the Dixon Hill stuff. That doesn't. Which I get a G. Oh.
When he decides to go and hide in the holodeck, and we cut to him at the holodeck panel in his Dixon Hill gear, Laura shouted out, "Don't do your sexy roleplay, Picard, with Lwaxana on board. She'll want involved. You should have gone for a horse ride."
later on in this episode, they have to go get Picard from the holodeck, and before he goes, Data says to Riker, before we go get him, do you mind waiting 5 minutes? And that was apparently so Data could change into holodeck appropriate clothing.
Oh, man, we haven't said it for a while. This is a great Data episode.
Oh, it's a great Data episode.
Data, so I took a note here of something that I thought was really intriguing. So obviously Data is coded autistic.
Yes.
And they use that really well in this episode because, maybe not in the most positive way, but when Picard is on a quote-unquote date with Lwaxana Troi, he's like, oh, I can't have this tension. So he gets Data to come down to just explain to her how, like, part of the engine works or something. And one of the things that, don't want to say, puts people off, like, for lack of a better term, of conversations with people who have that particular type of ASD, is that often, conversationally, they will just rhyme off lists of facts.
It's called, I believe the term is info dumping, is what I've heard it referred to. Yeah.
But it's like...
and I do it as well. So.
Oh, it's legitimately a large part of why I want to get tested, because I'm just like, I do that. Like, are you trying to tell me that isn't what a conversation is? Like, a conversation is me listing off some facts about the things that we're talking about and my opinions of them, and then I expect you to reply
Apparently,
in kind?
Normal people don't wait for their girlfriend to come home from work so they can go, oh, I'm glad you're here. I've learned so much about bees today.
I don't know if I've told you it, man. Have you ever seen Man Park, the SNL sketch?
Yes. Yeah. I have.
Did you know Vin Diesel has a twin brother? Am I balding? Dude?
Yes. Yeah, that's essentially my life. Like, I mean,
Well, a football team has 11 players, but a rugby team has 15 players.
Having to explain to Emma why it's so exciting that there's rumours that Denzel Washington and Giancarlo Esposito are going to be playing Professor Xavier and Magneto because the characters were originally based on Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And if anybody gets upset about this, I will bitch slap the fuck out of them, verbally and physically, because it shows a complete lack of understanding of the actual basis of the characters. Anyway.
As I said, I watched Dirty Dancing, and then after it, I went to the bathroom with my phone, and I think I now know so much about Dirty Dancing I could write a pamphlet. They
initiate Data's cock block mode. And he comes in and boards, and then Picard says, "Oh, thank God for you, Data. You've saved me from being ravaged by Lwaxana Troi." And then later on, he does the exact same thing, talking to holodeck characters about World War II, a subject they can't possibly comprehend. At least Data's talking to real people.
Sean, look, do you not know how this works? But no one's going to.
Why not put on sheets? If you just want to, just hang out in Dixon Hill's office reading the newspaper with fucking the game turned off.
You know the people, the crazies again. Sorry for the ableist term, but for the crazies you meet who are like, oh, the end is coming. It's all coming. What if they are just playing and we're just holodeck characters and they are holodeck?
Oh right, and they know.
Yeah. Oh, World War III. Don't look forward to that. So I watched this episode, and while I was watching it, I had to text Josh Weller, future celebrity name drop and consummate Star Trek fan, and I asked, "Are holodeck cigarettes dangerous?
Okay,
are they harmful? Because synthahol is what they drink."
Yeah, so physical objects are done by replicator technology. So that's a real cigarette. And I was going to bring that up. I've got a special note that we see smoking on TV, which is weirdly one of the few things that dates Star Trek.
Yeah.
Because it's all futuristic in space, but the fact that you see somebody having a cigarette, I'm like, oh, that's not allowed. And also, Picard, who has never smoked before, I can't believe they're harmful, because Picard has never smoked, because they don't have cigarettes in the future. So why is his first drag of an unfiltered Marlboro Red not fucking destroying him from the inside?
When, in 2013-ish, when they made the Constantine TV show, which is how you pronounce his name, it's how they say it in the comics, he makes that point several times, and I once got a reply from Neil Gaiman on Twitter confirming it. They couldn't have Matt, because it was on at like a certain time before the watershed, they couldn't have Matt Reeves smoke as John Constantine. Literally one of the defining features of that character, right?
Yeah.
So what they had to do for the first couple of episodes is like they'd cut to a scene of his like friend walking in a bar, and he'd be like stubbing out a cigarette in an ashtray.
Yeah.
And then it isn't until episodes like 5 or 6 that they actually show him walking into a scene with a lit cigarette in his mouth. And I've never seen it. I would bet money that he never does it in Leagues of Legends of Tomorrow.
I don't. I think there's a joke about him attempting to light a cigarette on the ship, and the ship's like safety systems being like, because I think he then kicks off because like one of their characters is a flame guy, and he's like, well, why not him? And he's like, well, that's not like the ship's programmed for that, but. Yeah. I absolutely love Constantine as a character because he's an angry, scouse, bisexual, punk chain smoker who, by all actual like measures of power within the DC universe, is one of the few people who can canonically kick the fuck out of Superman.
Yeah.
Because Superman's weak against magic, so John Constantine can just like put him in a bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was played by Jenna Coleman.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, he was.
Great. Do it.
It's brilliant.
Give me that more.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Did you notice that when at one point we cut back to the bridge and Smiley Joe is up in Wasp position?
I thought Lwaxana was going to go for Smiley Joe. I thought
100%.
Lwaxana was going to come in. Worf clocked that was very much what he would consider a stunt situation, so he swapped out.
I just think Worf was busy looking at the fish.
Oh, so here's a question for you, right? Bearing in mind that we know the holodeck to be murderous,
yeah,
is Picard choosing to risk his own life rather than have a conversation with Lwaxana Troi? Because okay, this is the thing I want to bring up. The thing I say about HR. Lwaxana Troi is an ambassador, which is an official position within the Federation, and she says she's going to host a dinner to welcome everybody to like her being on board the ship, and then only invites Picard.
Yeah.
Right, imagine somebody in your workplace did that to you, right? That's the quickest HR complaint ever. Just Lwaxana, I don't care what you're going through hormonally.
Yeah.
Get a vibrator. You can't do this. Mr. Hom drinks a lot in this episode, and I think it's because of putting up with Lwaxana's bullshit.
Yeah. I agree. He's still chiming away.
Picard dates a virtual employee at a later point. Fucking Riker gets sexually harassed on the bridge of all places. When Lwaxana turns up on the bridge, Deanna Troi says to her, "You can't just stroll onto the bridge." And I've written down, "You shouldn't be able to."
Yeah, you shouldn't even be able to take a turbo lift there.
Yeah, it should be. They should require some sort of security clearance.
Yeah. Is this, by the way, the first time that Riker and Troi admit to seeing each other? We obviously know that they've been will they won't they for a while. It's super obvious, but is this the first time they've said it out loud?
I think that in the first episode it's established that they have had a previous relationship, but only telepathically with each other. I don't know if it's ever been spoken out loud, but it's one of those things, I guess, that like we haven't seen it on screen, but I guess Riker's probably had a conversation when he's arrived on the vessel, when they've all first, like shortly after that, in that first episode where he's gone, just to make you aware, Captain, of a potential conflict of interest.
Yeah. That's right.
I would imagine that's a conversation that's happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's the first time it's been addressed to the audience.
Yeah, and if you want, Captain, you can actually watch it on the archives.
If you want to get your personal relaxation light and then put it on a TV while you're pretending to be Dixon Hill.
Yeah. Just to go back to the fish people, I think they were legitimately great aliens.
Oh, yeah, fantastic.
Like, they're not just forehead people, they look different, they act different, they are truly alien. And the reveal at the end, spoilers, if you've gotten this far into the episode and then went, I don't want to know the end because I'm going to watch it, Lwaxana Troi reveals that they're assassins who were sent to blow up the conference, and she's like, "How did you not notice this?"
They were going to be offered a position in the Federation, and instead they were there to blow it up. Which just don't join.
Yeah, exactly. I love the bit where she's like, "Well, their clothes are laced with explosives. That did you not notice?" And O'Brien's like, "What the? No."
Yeah, and then I love that because let's be honest, as an Irishman, an Irish transporter captain, there's two areas of expertise I would expect O'Brien to have. One is transporters, and the other's explosives.
Yeah.
But I do. That okay, so the entire episode is predicated on Lwaxana Troi constantly saying that everybody wants to have sex with her because that's all everyone's thinking about. And I was like, well, she's not a real psychic, it's fine. But then in the end of the episode, they do this fun reveal, which is, no, she does have psychic powers. She can immediately tell these two people are assassins. So does that mean that canonically Picard is constantly thinking of banging Lwaxana Troi?
Well, no, because don't they bring that up? They say that during the Betazoid menopause, that's what they all think all the time.
Okay. So
maybe it's just a byproduct of her just... I mean, she already always thought that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it just her psychic abilities being overpowered by her own relentless narcissism?
Yeah.
Also, I've not watched Picard season 2, but would Deanna Troi in that be about the age that Lwaxana Troi is in this?
Well, Laura... We watched Picard season 1, and Laura brought up that older Troi, they kind of Lwaxana her up a bit. Like, she wears kind of boho-ish clothes. So it's kind of Lwaxana-esque, but with her own flair.
Yeah.
So yeah, she is about that age, yeah.
Well, then Riker shouldn't be able to walk.
I think the death of a child is probably... It's a mood killer, to say the least.
I don't know what happens in Picard, so...
Oh, right. They had two kids and one of them died. I can't really remember how it happened. I wasn't really paying attention.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Picard isn't very good.
No, Picard season 1 isn't very good, and Picard 2 is apparently a fucking crime.
Second name drop. Josh texted me after the first episode of Picard season 2 and was like, "Oh my god, it's great! They've got the Borg back." And then about 6 episodes later, he texted me an apology. Essentially, he didn't go as far as to say that, but yeah, he went up.
Yeah. I've heard many things. The big reveal, apparently, is that 10 Forward, it's called 10 Forward because Guinan named it after a bar she used to own on Earth that was number 10 on Forward Street. But it's not called that. It's called that because it's the forward section of Deck 10.
Yep.
Which makes me think that the people who made Picard Season 2 didn't bother to, watch Star Trek The Next Generation before they fucking made it.
Awful.
Well,
I don't really have a lot to say about this one. I quite liked it, but there wasn't really a lot to pick apart. The fish people, the Antideans, brought a slow cooker. That was interesting.
Yeah, slow cooker with some dead bits of fish with a little thing underneath that wiggles them around so it looks like they're moving. But they themselves never move. I'm certain it looked great in standard definition, but in high definition, it's obvious. That needs a little sprinkling of CGI over the top, I think, at some point in the future. But I do have a genuine question about this episode, which is something I was thinking, is I don't get what Lwaxana Troi is for as a character. Well, let me rephrase. I understand that what she is actually for is allowing Majel Roddenberry to appear in the show. Yeah. But, she's an overbearing, narcissistic mother, which is an interesting trope to have, I guess, for maybe one episode. But the problem that you have with that is it's only relatable content for people who have grown up with narcissistic parents.
Yeah.
And people who have grown up with narcissistic parents and recognise that fact really, really, really don't like to be reminded about it. I'm just speaking for me,
Yeah.
but it's like, oh yeah, no, it's like it's played for laughs, like from an outsider's perspective. But I just look at it, and every time she stands up, I'm just like, I feel so sorry for Troi, because from inside, this is hell.
Yeah.
She's this narcissistic mother who can get in your head, so she knows that you're thinking that she's a rampaging narcissist.
Yeah.
And uses that against you in arguments. I genuinely cannot think of a worse thing. I'd rather fight the Borg. And like Deanna Troi's reaction to detecting her mother is on this like shuttle that's turned up is the same like get out of your chair, we're in terrible danger, that she does like when the fucking Borg turn up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question about a tiny little detail that I saw in this episode, which is that when Picard and Troi and Riker are having the meeting in the ready room about, Lwaxana wanting to get the one-way ticket to Pound Town, etc. But Riker calls Picard Captain. Now, Riker is allowed to call him Jean-Luc. He, Pulaski, I imagine Geordie is as well, because Scotty was allowed to call Kirk Jim. He just chose not to.
Yeah.
Which is a character trait that I didn't realise until I watched an interview with Simon Pegg where he brought it up. I was like, that's pretty interesting. But he is allowed to call him Jean-Luc in, I imagine, certain circumstances. And I thought that Picard calling him number one rather than Commander or Mr. Riker is almost like a kind of recognition of, when we are together and the rest of the crew are here, you do have to call me Captain, but I'm going to call you number one because it's a term of endearment. Like it's not your rank, it's you are my number one, right? But Riker calls Picard Captain in that scene, so does he have to call him that when Troi is there?
I don't know if he has to. I think that Picard would be fine with him calling him Jean-Luc in those circumstances. But I think Riker does. It's a similar thing to so my thing with Scotty is I always imagined it that I don't think Scotty is calling Kirk Captain instead of calling him Jim out of he certainly does respect Kirk, but I don't think he's doing that out of respect for Kirk. I think he does that out of respect for the Enterprise. I think that Scotty's thing is, this is a beautiful ship. You are the person who is in charge of it. That deserves respect and
I
recognition.
just keep it running.
Yeah, and that's and he finds it a privilege to keep such a wonderful piece of machinery going in that thing. And I think with Riker in that circumstance, he could have said Jean-Luc.
Yeah,
but there's another crew member present, and even though it's Troi, who is weirdly adjacent to the command structure, even though I think she's technically a lieutenant.
Yeah.
It's that thing of speaking of which, shouldn't you know how the Doctor's allowed to be oh no, you've been overtaken by a space bug, you can't be captain anymore. Shouldn't the counselor also have that? No, he's gone bonkers. Power.
Yeah, I imagine it would be. I don't imagine the counselor would be able to do it off their own back, but I think probably in conjunction with I think Troi could go to head
Pulaski.
of medical and say he needs to go, and the doctor, the head of medical, would then be like, I concur, let's do it. And it wouldn't just be head of medical's call. I think Troi could be the one to be like, no, we have to do this. It's not really an option. I'm telling you that this is the case, and it's now up to you to use your power to actually do it.
Yeah. I think that's the dynamic that's at play there. I do have one troubling thing I do need to bring up about Picard, and it's so I noticed in this episode, and I'm slightly concerned about it. Okay, we know that there has been reference to terrible things done by humanity from Picard, but it's usually events that are in our future, like they're fictional, like things like the post-atomic horror and stuff like that. Picard sits down with a bunch of holographic characters, and they're talking about not wanting America to enter a second world war. And he lists off all the positives that come from America for like going into World War II. And at no point does he feel that one of the positives he might need to bring up is, you know, ending the Holocaust. In fact, Picard, as far as I'm aware, has never referenced the Holocaust.
Which is bizarre because he's so proudly French.
Yeah. Unless he was Vichy French.
Yeah. Because it is interesting because what he says is technically correct. Like, it's I'm gonna space this sentence out so that the Daily Mail can't just quote it. But World War II happening, as obviously the atrocities, you know, were horrible. I don't think it's controversial to say that World War II was a bad time for a lot of people. But
we're going to come out right now and firmly state that we think the events that happened in World War II were bad.
Yeah, exactly. But Picard, in what he says, is technically correct. We did become a much more technologically advanced species because of the things that were happening around the atrocities.
Yeah, it's once you know you're facing an enemy that has no moral qualms and views science as key to their success in winning a war, it very much accelerates everybody else's fucking need to take scientific development seriously. You start putting a lot of money into fucking crazier and weirder things that you'd never have done, and you invent radar and the computer and rockets and shit like that. Yeah. But then equally, it's bad that the Holocaust happened.
Did you get that, Daily Mail?
Yeah.
Gonna have to put a lot of ellipsis in that fucking statement to get me.
I mean, the Daily Mail don't. The thing is that you're forgetting, Mark, is that the Daily Mail don't think it was bad that the Holocaust happened. So you should listen to this hip and happening new podcast. They pointed out that Jean-Luc Picard might be a Holocaust denier, and we're here for it.
Oh, Jesus.
Is it just because they didn't want to reference anything too real-worldy? Because it's like, that's the point where you run into, maybe you're running afoul of censorship. Like, you can make up whatever bollocks you want to in the future, and it's not real, so it just,
well, no, because there is a way to, as we just did, there is a way to say that. You don't even have to put in all the caveats we did. You could have him exactly say it and have Shakespearean actor Sir Patrick Stewart deliver that in a way where you can read through his tone and expression that, yes, these advances were great, but it came at a pretty terrible cost. He has a great face. Yeah. He could do that.
And then equally then sell, but that terrible cost would be much worse if America doesn't enter the war.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, you can definitely do something. But yeah, But equally, Jesus, Picard's really bad at playing his favourite game, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
Because he's like, I've not got any money, and this guy's pulled a gun on me. And it's like, well, look, first of all, you've read the Dixon Hill books. He doesn't die in any of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, right, it's not a Neil Gaiman novel. It doesn't start with him getting shot and then he has to solve his own murder from beyond the grave.
Now, to be fair to Picard, he has no way of knowing whether the holodeck safety mechanisms are on or not.
No, he specifically
without taking a bullet. That's the test. That's the litmus test.
He turned them off when he went on. It was like, if I finish this game, then I might have to marry Lwaxana Troi, because apparently the concept that no is a complete sentence. Like, again, this is like Gene Roddenberry all over. It's older women, she's super horny, and consent isn't a thing.
Yeah. Sorry, just to go back. There's a really good joke in this week's episode of Lower Decks about the holodeck safety mechanisms, because they Although something did happen where I was like, oh, the fans ain't going to like that. So the characters have to find, because Lower Decks is canon. That's more controversial than that shit I said about World War II being good. But the characters have to find a shortcut through the ship to beat another team of Lower Deckers who are trying to get somewhere to rig a competition in their favour. And the only way they can get there is through the holodeck, but the holodeck is on. So they sneak into the holodeck, and Dr. Talana, I can't remember the Lower Deck characters' names, and the Bajoran security guy, Trask, I think is his name, they're doing like a Bonnie and Clyde situation. So they walk into like a black and white bank, and there's lots of jokes like, oh, what is this thing? Oh, this is a bank. Oh, hey, can I withdraw some pieces of paper that have no intrinsic value? It's a good bit. But then they're like, where are Trask and Delana? And it turns out they're doing Bonnie and Clyde. But they go in there to fuck. And the only way that they can get excited is to shoot guns with the safety off. So the three Lower Deckers are like hiding behind a camera. And then Trask kind of gets a bit worried about something. He loses confidence in something that Talana has said. So he says, holodeck, freeze. And there's a bullet like inches away from Boimler's face. But that's not the controversial thing. The controversial thing is that they sneak around the teller's desk and open a trash can, and it takes them out of the holodeck. Whereas we know from the Moriarty episode that you can't just get out when there's one on if the holodeck. Well, maybe if the holodeck that was taken over by an evil Sherlock Holmes ghost. So
I'm going to suggest that we know from modern that in TNG that they reference that the holodeck is relatively new technology.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to bet that later versions of the holodeck have a fucking escape hatch in the back. Because they were like, how many times have people got trapped and or murdered in these?
How many people would have to die before they put an emergency exit on the holodeck?
Here's the thing. We know it's definitely more than one.
Yeah.
Like, when the guy got shot in that Dixon Hill episode, the first one, that's the point where they should have been like, well, Geordie, can you put an emergency door in the back of this? And then Geordie was just like, no. It's like, we can't, it'll stop working. It's like, it'll be like having a dead pixel on the TV. That little section will just always have a hatch in it, and it will ruin the game for a lot of people. And it's like, and they were like, oh, okay, that's fair enough then. Everybody, just sign a waiver before you go on. I'm willing to bet anybody gets killed by the holodeck that Picard lies to their family. Yeah. He's like, writes them at home. He's like, your son gave his life in the noble quest for knowledge. Yeah. He was killed by a slime monster on Krasen 4.
Or the ones where they're like, he died from gunshot wound. Picard got time travel.
We landed on the planet Gun, where everyone and everything is a gun.
Do you think that because Data went away to dress up, he's like, oh my god, yeah, give me 5 minutes to go and change. Do you think between the bridge or the wardrobe department on the Enterprise and the holodeck, Data was saying to Riker, I mean, come on, mate, play the game.
Here's something. Can you rig a transporter to change your outfit for you? Like, can I just have new clothes beamed onto me? I
mean, no. That would be the point. Now, I am all for like making technology better, right? But the way that we know the holodeck works, the transporter room works, the last thing we want to do is combine it with a replicator.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point.
Yeah. In case you come out with a cardboard box for a head.
I think that's everything we're going to get on this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I read genuinely. It's not that it's an all right-ish episode, but its main driving plot line is Gene Roddenberry nonsense that needs to stop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I can't believe as a Star Trek fan I'm going to say this. I'm so glad he gets sick soon. He brought it on himself. I look up why he got ill, and it's basically that he was on cocaine from Star Trek: The Motion Picture onwards. And he stayed up to finish scripts. He was staying up late on amphetamines, which, like, how can you write? I don't get. I've taken MDMA and I've tried to write something down, and I end up throwing the pen across the room in a rage.
I mean, we've said it before, and we will say it again. Gene, thanks for everything, but you are the worst guy at Star Trek.
Thank you for everything, and please stop.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.